Oftentimes in our work, we field the question, does blended learning work? Now, that's an urgent question for many people considering that this innovation is spreading quickly across K-12 schools in our country. But really, it's the wrong question to be asking if we want to arm practitioners with useful information. First of all, blended learning isn't really an intervention. So typically in education research, we test the efficacy of an intervention to see if it works for many students, for some students on average. But blended learning is essentially a delivery model. It's like face-to-face instruction or a textbook. It's a way of delivering instruction to and assessing students. And as a result, it's not useful to evaluate an entire delivery model. You want to actually evaluate particular applications of that delivery model designed to solve specific problems. So we encourage folks not to ask, does blended learning work, but is blended learning a viable solution for a problem that we are trying to solve? If we're trying to increase small group instruction because we think that we're betting on that that's going to drive up student outcomes, you'd want to test, is our station rotation model with a particular software achieving that outcome? And that information will not only be useful to you as a school practitioner, but it's the type of research that we need to be spreading across the country as more and more schools choose to implement blended learning. The other thing to keep in mind is that as we target particular problems, you actually probably don't even want to be asking the high-level question of, does a particular software tool work? Because we've started to shift away from sort of on-average student outcomes. That's the power of blended learning. And so we actually want to know, does a particular software work in a particular model for a particular subset of students? Or put differently, what works for what students in what circumstances? Now that's a very radical departure from traditional education research, because traditional education research uses a singular yardstick to measure what works on average for students. If we're moving into a time where we can actually use blended learning to reach different students at different times in different ways, we actually want to study blended learning at the use case level. What particular software tool is driving a particular student outcome, and can we sort of start to unearth why? Now there's a really helpful chart that we're showing here from Blended by my colleagues Michael Horn and Heather Staker. And this is just a starting point for schools to identify their particular goals, both in terms of the type of control they want to grant their students, the type of model they may want to implement, and to understand which models are going to start to optimize against those different problems, challenges, and goals. And so take a look at this chart, and it actually is going to unearth not only promising models for you, but really the types of questions we want to start asking in blended learning research. Armed with that sort of information, we're actually going to be able to leverage blended and online learning to reach each individual student in his or her circumstances more effectively than our analog world has ever allowed us to do.